Emisión.net.
Hello again and welcome to Letter from England, broadcasting for AC Press and the Spanish Evangelical Alliance. The row over ecumenism is hotting up as the Alliance has hit back in the face of criticism over its reticence, or at least alleged reticence, faced with the proposal that the Federation of Evangelical Organisations, the group which represents Protestants in dealing with the Spanish government, should join the Conference of European Churches and the World Evangelical Alliance. Well, Manuel Suárez, spokesman for the Alliance, has replied to criticism which we reported last week in AC Press at its response to the proposal that the Federation join the Conference of European Churches, particularly that organisation, as that's more liberal. Faced with serious opposition from some quarters, the Federation has postponed any decision until it has gleaned more information as to what such membership would entail. The proposal was, in fact, that the Federation should become an associate member of the two ecumenical groups, the World Evangelical Alliance and the Conference of European Churches. Well, whereas conservative evangelicals might be happier at adherence to the World Evangelical Alliance, the more liberal wing of the Church would see membership of the Conference of European Churches leading to later membership or subsequent membership of the World Council of Churches, and that of course would get conservative evangelicals very itchy indeed. Now Suárez points out that it was not the Alliance but in fact the Evangelical Council of Galicia which made a considered response to the proposal, arguing that only individual churches or denominations can make such a decision and that churches should be given much more information about what membership of the conference entails. Now, the Federation recognises that very different views are held on the issue among the churches, something that Manuel López, a member of the Executive Committee of Madrid's Evangelical Council, who criticised the Galician Council and the Evangelical Alliance over their stance on the matter, seems to ignore. Suárez says that forcing a church to go along with a majority vote on such an issue would be unreasonable and inappropriate. So what is all the fuss about? Well, López published an article. The article was published by the Latin American and Caribbean Agency, and in it he claims that the postponement is but the latest anti-ecumenical episode, quote-unquote, and that membership of the Conference of European Churches should be taken for granted, again I quote, by every Christian who hasn't ripped John chapter 17 out of their Bibles. Well, provocative language, certainly, and López interprets this in an institutional way, arguing that the Federation should, as representatives of all Protestants in Spain, belong both to the Conference of European Churches and the World Council of Churches. Well, that latter suggestion, of course, will polarise opinion among evangelicals even more strongly, given the liberal and politicised nature of the World Council of Churches. And to read the World Council of Churches into John chapter 17 would not be everybody's exegesis. Now, López continues, the worst part of this new blow from the persistent anti-ecumenism of the Evangelical Alliance is perhaps the typical weakness of the Federation in the face of attacks by the religious right. It's one of his favourite phrases, actually, the religious right, which I think he's nicked from somewhere else. Now, in fact, López goes on and on about this so-called religious right in his article, but Suárez has little time for this, saying that such a view is completely false, that there's a wide range of political views in the Alliance. And he says there's no point in trying to analyse Alliance members on the basis of an alleged left or right political viewpoint, but rather by looking at what they believe with regard to the faith. He adds that it is equally futile to try and classify people on a left-right axis according to their views on ecumenism, especially when done in such a superficial way as López has done. Now, López also has a foray into history and writes about the founder of the Evangelical Alliance in London in 1846, Thomas Chalmers, a figure, he claims, that, quote, the religious right that dominates the Evangelical Alliance in Spain completely ignores. Perhaps I should have said the Spanish Evangelical Alliance, you know what I mean. Well, Suárez says this is manifestly untrue, pointing to mentions of Chalmers in the Alliance magazine in 1996, on the occasion of the 150th anniversary of the founding of the Evangelical Alliance in London, and in a booklet written by the erstwhile chairman of the Spanish Evangelical Alliance, José María Martínez. But also, and more pertinently, Suárez clarifies that Chalmers' ecumenism had nothing to do with Rome, but was the kind of ecumenism that the vast majority of us are interested in, that which exists between evangelicals. And here's the rub. You see, the ecumenism that López and his ilk are seeking to promote, and certainly which is the ethos and line of the Conference of European Churches and even more of the World Council of Churches, is that we are one with Rome. Whereas evangelical ecumenism, which would be supported by the majority of evangelical churches in Spain, is actually an agreement on the basics of the Christian faith. In other words, between evangelicals, those who accept the authority of Scripture and not the tradition of the Church, and those who look only to that authority rather than to any hierarchical structure, and so on. Of course, there are other major differences on the cross, on papal authority, on the position of Mary, on the significance of the Mass, the whole issue of priestly absolution, and so on and so forth. There are many doctrines, of course, which separate us from Catholicism, and some of them are very basic ones. However, López, not content with his attack on the Evangelical Alliance, on the Evangelical Council of Galicia, and on the Federation of Evangelical Organisations, also lambasts what presumably he would call the religious left. Members of the Conference of European Churches in Spain, the IEE, which is a Methodist-Presbyterian denomination, and the Anglican Church in Spain, for not fighting their corner in the Federation debate. And finally, he has to go to his own denomination, the Spanish Baptist Union, saying things would be very different if the third natural member, the Baptist Union, belonged to ecumenical institutions. He doesn't seem to realize that actually many evangelicals do not see this broad type of ecumenism at all, or find it at all appealing. Now, in his reply, Suárez argues that in Jesus' prayer in John 17, he does not unite indiscriminately, and I quote Suárez, but refers to those who are not of the world. And although we know that there are Catholics who are members of the invisible universal Church of Christ, says Suárez, the visible Catholic Church is most certainly of the world. Unquote. As for the history of ecumenism, Suárez reminds López that it didn't begin with dialogue with Rome, but dialogue between Protestants. It was only much later that the World Council of Churches wanted to reach agreement with the Catholic Church, and I quote Suárez again, which explains why the vast majority of evangelicals in this country do not support its neo-ecumenism. We support the former, dialogue between Protestants, but not the latter. And Suárez concludes by saying that the Evangelical Alliance and the Evangelical Council of Galicia are not anti-ecumenical at all, quite the opposite. Look at the denominational plurality of their membership, for instance. But, quote, our ecumenism is based on biblical truth, not despite it. Well, AC Press has contacted almost all the organisations mentioned in this that I've mentioned earlier, but apart from the Alliance, none of them wish to make any comment. And the Alliance is considering asking the Latin American and Caribbean Agency for a right of reply, given the comments made about them in the article. But the issue of ecumenism, what it really means, and what is worthwhile pursuing, looks set to continue for some time to come. Thank you for listening. You can listen to our broadcast each week on emission.net. Goodbye for now.
Emission.net